There is a moment before sleep that the world forgets. It is the sacred pause between consciousness and dream, when the mind becomes porous and the soul becomes receptive. In this twilight, your words matter more than you think, because what you whisper in the dark becomes instruction for your destiny. You've likely been told that the unconscious mind is powerful, but you haven't been told that it is listening, always listening, especially in the silence before sleep. You see, your exhaustion at the end of the day isn't just physical. It's spiritual fatigue from holding back the truth of your soul all day long. And when the masks fall, when the noise dies down, the deepest version of you finally gets a chance to speak or to listen. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But here's what he didn't say. The unconscious doesn't respond to logic. It responds to symbol, desire, and devotion. This is why your final thoughts at night become the seeds of your future. Because the soul doesn't hear words the way your mind does. It hears meaning, it hears longing, it hears alignment, or the lack of it. And every night, as you lay down, you stand at the gates of your inner world. You are either reinforcing the same prison or opening the door to a different path. If you end your day replaying pain, fear, guilt, your unconscious believes, this is where we live. But if you end your day with intention, with sacred phrase, with symbolic truth, your soul begins to remember what it came here to become. This isn't about positive thinking. This is about ancient remembering, a ritual of resonance between your words and yourself. Because what you say right before sleep is not just heard by your mind, it is recorded by your soul. Carl Jung didn't just explore the unconscious as a shadowed repository of memory and trauma. He saw it as a living myth, a symbolic terrain where images spoke louder than ideas. To Jung, symbols were not decorations of the psyche. They were the language of the divine within us, and nowhere is this language more powerful or more ignored than in the threshold of sleep. When you are conscious, you speak in logic. But when you are unconscious, your soul speaks in images, feelings, metaphors, and yes, in dreams, which is why sleep is not simply a physiological rest. It is a spiritual descent, a reunion, a return. Jung observed that the unconscious doesn't care for morality or social norms. It only cares for wholeness. So when you repress, deny, or ignore your inner longing, the unconscious doesn't forget. It encodes. It stores your unlived life in dream, in projection, in silence. But here lies the beauty, and the key Jung never stopped pointing toward. The unconscious may be hidden, but it is not deaf. It listens, not to your public statements, but to your symbolic rituals. The way you end your day, the thoughts you fall asleep to, the prayers you no longer think are being heard, all of this becomes architecture in the world within. And here's the miracle. One word, spoken with presence, can shift a decade of internal programming. One phrase aligned with soul can turn the tide of a repeating fate. Because to Jung, a symbol is never just a symbol. It is a door to the parts of you you forgot. A door to the archetype you carry but haven't yet embodied. A door to a version of your life that your surface self has never dared to imagine, but your soul has never stopped craving. So why do we fall asleep in silence or in stress? Why do we allow the last energy of the day to be noise, numbness, or neglect? Because no one taught us that our final words are not final. They echo in the halls of the soul. They are remembered by the dreamer within. Every day you wear a mask, not out of malice or deception, but out of necessity. You move through the world with roles to play, tasks to fulfill, expectations to meet. You nod, you speak, you agree, you perform. And yet each night, when the day ends and the doors close, something aches. Not because the world was wrong, but because you lost yourself again inside it. This is the silent tragedy of the persona. It doesn't scream, it sighs. In Jung's terms, the persona is not evil. It is the necessary interface between you and society. But when the persona becomes the only voice, the soul is silenced. That is why sleep is sacred, not just for rest, but for realignment. Because in those final moments before unconsciousness, the masks fall, the ego weakens, and the self returns to the edge of your awareness, asking to be remembered. Here, in this liminal space, ritual matters, not for religion, but for remembrance. Because your unconscious is not impressed by performance, it listens for truth, and the most powerful truths are often whispered. So tonight, instead of scrolling through distraction, instead of falling asleep under the weight of tomorrow, instead of collapsing into the same emotional residue of every day before, do this. Light a candle, even if only in your mind. Speak one sentence that feels like home, not something you read, not something you think you should say, but something that comes from the marrow of your desire. Something like, I am safe in the silence. I am ready to receive what aligns with my soul. Tonight I return to who I am beneath everything. Let it be simple, let it be sacred, let it be yours, because when your day ends with authenticity, your dreams begin with truth, and the unconscious, ever faithful, ever listening, will take your phrase as command, not a demand for results, but a signal of readiness, a spiritual gesture, a return to the language that shaped you long before you learned how to speak. In the beginning was the Word. It is not a coincidence that the opening line of the Gospel of John speaks of language, not light, not time, not form, but word, because to speak is to shape, to name is to create, to declare is to align with divine intention. This is not just theology, it is psychology. It is spirituality woven into every breath you take. Carl Jung believed that biblical truths were not just historical claims, but archetypal maps. And this line from John is one of the clearest mirrors of the soul's power. The word here is logos, a sacred, living logic that vibrates with divine order. Not mere syllables, but symbolic intention, language that transcends explanation and becomes transformation. And that's why what you say before you sleep matters more than you were ever told. Because the final words of your day are not just casual, they are creative. They ripple into your dreams. They echo in your body. They begin to write the pages of your tomorrow before the sun even rises. Psalm 16:7 says, I will bless the Lord who guides me. Even at night my heart instructs me. Even at night, even in silence, even in sleep, your heart is listening. And more than that, it is teaching you. But what is it teaching if what you feed it is fear? What is it birthing if your last words are bitterness? This is why spiritual traditions from ancient Judaism to early Christianity to mystic monasticism emphasized evening prayer, not as duty, but as design. To close the day with truth, to surrender the night with faith, to re-enter the divine conversation your soul was always part of. So tonight, don't just drift off. Don't just collapse into fatigue or fantasy. Whisper a word. Bless the silence, and trust that the God who speaks in symbols and soul hears what no one else can. The prayer between your words, the longing between your thoughts, the truth you never dared say aloud, but finally do, right before you sleep. There comes a moment after all the words have been spoken, when only one voice remains. Not the critic, not the persona, not the anxious planner or the wounded child, but the self. And that voice does not shout. It does not explain. It does not demand. It waits until you are still enough to hear it. This is the essence of spiritual integration, not the accumulation of knowledge, but the reconnection with what you already are. because you were never disconnected from God. You were only overwhelmed by noise. You were never unworthy of desire. You were only taught to suppress it. You were never too far gone. You just forgot the way back. And the way back is through the symbolic, through the phrase that speaks to you, through the night that welcomes your surrender, through the dream that doesn't just entertain but instructs. This is why the unconscious is not your enemy. It is your most faithful guide. It remembers what you've exiled. It holds what your ego rejected. And it speaks in metaphors because truth is too sacred to be delivered plainly. So when you align your final words with your deepest truth, you are not just manifesting, you are re-entering a covenant. You are allowing your soul to speak the language it was fluent in long before you learned how to fear. And in that stillness, in that sacred symbolic whisper, something shifts. Not always immediately, not always visibly, but undeniably. You sleep differently. You feel guided without knowing why. You begin to attract the real, not the reactive, because you are finally in conversation with yourself, not just your survival. So say the phrase, not like a spell, but like a remembering. Say it like a vow, say it like a return, and trust that every night you do, you are not just ending a day. You are beginning a realignment that ripples across everything. So tonight, before you surrender to sleep, don't just replay the pain. Don't just rehearse the plans. Pause and speak, not to the world, not to the noise, but to your soul. Because the part of you that still believes in light is listening. And it doesn't need a loud declaration. It needs a sacred whisper. One phrase, one truth, one alignment between desire and destiny. And as you drift off, trust this. What you name begins to take form. What you bless begins to unfold. What you say in faith begins to echo in the invisible. You are not just falling asleep. You are speaking into creation. So tonight say it from your heart, say it with your whole being, say it until the words are no longer yours, but the voice of something higher speaking through you. And if this spoke to something deep inside, write in the comments, "My soul remembers in the silence." Because maybe you don't need another answer. You just need to return to the language your soul never forgot, the language of stillness, the language of symbol, the language of self. Let the others sleep to forget. You will sleep to remember.